Welcome back here to USNDA TV. I'm Noah Scheinbaum. I'm joined right now by the CEO and co-founder of one of the hottest drone companies in America, Mr. Soren Monroe-Anderson. Soren, welcome to Florida.
Thank you. Good to be here.
Welcome to the conference. This is a pretty interesting couple of days here. It's awesome to see you here. I know taking a day out of the busy schedule, you guys are, you're on contracts left and right. You're raising big dollars. Are you in like what Elon would call production hell right now? How do you describe current state of Neros?
I would say we were in production hell 6 months ago,
okay.
Or the first stage of it. There's going to be many more stages of it, but we've been pretty steady on our production rate. Right now, we're doing about 2,500 drones a month. And we can crank that out. It's really a question of who's going to be buying it at higher quantities.
Hopefully a question that we as the United States of America can answer sooner rather than later. We'll get into all that. Maybe let's start at the top here. Your background is super interesting. We've got the drone racing course or drone maneuver competition going on downstairs. Mm-hmm. Your background is maybe more familiar with this than a lot of the military service members who are holding the sticks and are on stage with an announcer and with sportscasters. Tell us about how you got into this space in the first place.
Yeah, so I started flying FPV when I was about 11 years old. So before that, I was flying RC airplanes and just tinkering on a bunch of stuff growing up. And yeah, I saw FPV online when it was kind of just getting started. There was a few people, well-known pilots back then who were like posting videos on YouTube, and I thought that was the coolest thing ever. So I taught myself how to build and fly. And then after a few years of doing it more casually, I decided I wanted to try to race professionally. So that's when I started practicing a lot. And then in 2018 is when I got third place at, it was the first drone nationals that I ever qualified for. I got third there. And that kind of kicked off racing with Team USA and doing a lot more like a professional racing. And so did professional racing for about 4 or 5 years and kind of did every professional circuit, won the multi-GP World Championship in 2020, and then started a small company, FPV Supply Co., that was serving drone racers. And so that was kind of the FPV background.
It's cool. We've had, there's a lot of people now in the industry who come from the military side, which is, hey, I wish I had this tech, or I wish the stuff that I was given didn't suck. But you're coming from it like, hey, no, we were using the stuff. We were actually doing the thing before people thought it was cool. Something that mainstream folks even really knew much about. What do you think what was about your childhood or your upbringing that led you into drone racing in the first place? Like it's an interesting and a very niche hobby. Did your parents have anything to do with it? Like, what's the tie?
I think it just was being naturally interested in things that fly, mechanical systems. So I grew up in Anchorage, Alaska, and I was surrounded by bush planes and boats, and I did a lot of outdoors stuff, but I also was just very interested in technology, and so I wanted to know how things worked. I wanted to build things, and so I was like working on engines. I was building like random projects. I was doing RC cars, RC airplanes. And then drones was a thing that just clicked as like, it was interesting enough. It was deep enough that I could just kind of do that as my main focus. So I think it was a natural tendency. I've also always been very, very interested in defense technology. When I was about 8 years old, I wrote a letter to the president with weapon systems that I had sketched out on a piece of paper, just, to share my ideas. So it was kind of a weird, like, natural interest in both things that have now converged. And I also kind of always knew that I wanted to start my own company. And so I feel like what I'm doing now is actually just what I thought I would be doing, even though the transition isn't, as obviously natural from the outside.
What did the president write back to your weapon system note?
It was something about, happy to see young Americans being interested in national security.
Who was the president at the time?
Obama at the time.
Okay. Yeah. So we got to find the White House fellow who crafted
Yeah.
Obama's response. If you're out there, if you received Soren's note, let us know.
Exactly.
We'd love to meet you. That's funny. That's awesome, man. The note I wrote to the president at that age was not about technology. It was about I was actually here in Florida and saw fish speared through the eye at a fishing dock. And I said, this seems really mean. Why are these people doing that? So hey, this is why you're building the technology and I'm asking questions.
We had different takes.
Different takes. And, but man, yours I think was right. So you jumped in the fray. Defense was interesting to you. Was there someone in the military that you looked up to? Was there a superhero? Like, what was the military side of the inspiration when you were younger?
I think I would probably say Iron Man as like the superhero. It's really funny actually going back and watching those movies now because it's just about like a defense tech founder. He's at scale, but it's like a true hero's journey. It's a lot of like personal struggle, and then there's like the technology side. And as a kid, I latched on to like the technology side. I mean, Iron Man suit's the coolest thing ever. Like my life goal is to build an Iron Man suit.
Hell yeah.
But when I go back and rewatch those movies, it's actually crazy to kind of pick up all the other layers to it because they capture so much that is really, really interesting for, I think, like any entrepreneur.
Yeah. I mean, the number of people who I think are probably inspired by trying to build Jarvis is not single digits. It's like there are some substantial number of founders. You've got the Apple headsets and things. I mean, all of this seems to be emulating science fiction, like what somebody dreamed up. So
totally.
Shout out to the fiction writers out there. Keep doing what you're doing. It's important. It's inspiring generation. So very cool. So Soren, you guys jumped in the fray. Neros has made serious waves now. We've talked about this before. There are 2,000 plus drone manufacturers in the United States, right? That number is growing every day, I think. And yet you guys have carved a real path for yourselves really fast, and you're winning major contracts. You got PBAS. You've got, you've raised a ton of money from firms that previously, like Sequoia, didn't really play in defense in a meaningful way. How are you able to carve through? Why are you guys different than all of those other firms?
Yeah, I think part of it is the background that me and Olaf have, being so close to the details and so close to the technology really helps. And there's not a ton of overlap between people who are like that deep and competent in the FPV space that also are interested in like doing a startup and kind of understand the landscape. I also think we started at the perfect time. I think if you started a drone company like pre 2022, 2023, there was a very different just shape of the world. There was no one buying at super high quantities or no one consuming at super high quantities. And the kind of signal to go focus on like scaling production wasn't really there, right? If you were in America, the DoD at the time was certainly not purchasing that, but you also didn't have the full scale invasion of Ukraine, which obviously has shifted everything. Yeah. And so I think starting middle of 2023 was basically perfect because even at that point when we started, the U.S. government wasn't that interested in what we were doing, so we just focused on building a good thing for Ukraine, but we didn't only do that for many years, right? Yeah. It was like we got started by building a good thing for Ukraine, and then the interest started growing rapidly from the U.S. and from allied countries, and so that lets us lean forward on more funding, hiring more quickly, all those sorts of things. So timing's really, really important.
Yeah.
And then I think we took a very inspired approach looking at kind of the most successful hardware companies in America, looking at the SpaceX's, honestly, a lot of credit to Elon for doing hardware things in America, but also the companies around us where we're located in El Segundo, in LA, and then being so close to Silicon Valley. I think we have access to the best talent in the world for what we're doing.
Yeah.
It was a very, very intentional decision to put the business in Los Angeles.
Yeah.
The first people we hired were, our COO, who's a 12-and-a-half-year SpaceX veteran, and then, tons of people from the surrounding companies. And it truly, everything comes down to the people. And so having access to that is a massive unfair advantage.
Talk to us about, I think first off, it's kind of a truism that timing matters almost as much as anything else, probably more than anything else. You guys stuck the landing on that one. I don't know if that was by design or by accident. We'll give you credit as a founder. It was your brilliant foresight, 2023. What is going on in El Segundo? And I don't mean that, I'm not talking about zins and bench presses. I'm talking about why is this a moment where you're seeing this kind of talent density, this concentration of companies in this area at this time? And obviously it has played an important role for you guys in the development of the company.
Yeah. It's a really great question because I think what's happening there is in El Segundo is incredibly special. I think it's given a place that aligns with the identity of a lot of companies working on things that are different than what you saw in traditional Silicon Valley. So, there is the kind of the culture that was very visible online of El Segundo over the past 2 years has been, somewhat silly and extreme. That was somewhat by design. Yeah. We had to make a name for the place and being more extreme helps with that. But when you actually look at the companies in El Segundo, most of them are barely online. Most of them are not working on defense. Most of them are actually just doing things that are really interesting and really hard, and it attracts people who want to work incredibly hard. And so, there's the sort of external reputation, and then there's, what is actually happening in El Segundo. And to me, what's actually happening in El Segundo is that it is become a place for people who want to work on things that are different and things that are hard.
Yeah, it feels, I don't want to say it's Silicon Valley without the politics, because I actually think it's leaned into some of these cultural fractions and said, hey, we're just going to be really clear. We're on the other side of this, and we live in America, and we have to defend this country, and we're going to build things that, yes, can be used to accelerate lethality, or can, and that's okay. And I think there's a crucial, as an outside observer, what sets it apart in my mind from other, you have Space Coast, you have other areas in the country that have given rise to great defense companies, but it's a young people's movement, which I think is different. And it takes something different to get, to make it cool for a 23-year-old to go work in this versus, name that prime. People still work at those companies, but it's a different vibe, at least seems to me.
Yeah. I mean, it used to not be a controversial thing to work on defense, right? And then there became a period of time where it was controversial, and now I think it's swinging back the other way. Yeah. But we had to have a very different sort of cultural landscape than traditional Silicon Valley for this to work.
Yeah.
And even for the companies that aren't working directly on defense, a lot of them are doing things that are slightly pushing the boundaries of regulatory or just what people perceive as normal. Yeah. And so making an environment where it is okay to do that doesn't matter what side of the aisle you sit on. Actually, it's just can you do something that is different than the normal track and have a community around it? That's super powerful.
What do you, last Gundo question.
Yeah.
What do you think was the tipping point? Was there a personality? Was there a company? Was there a moment? What, because this is the Malcolm Gladwell thing, but what was the moment where this went from being a science experiment to something that's in the mainstream?
So in early 2024, there was a defense tech hackathon in El Segundo, and it actually started off, or for myself and a lot of the sort of core El Segundo founders, the weekend started off with a party bus we actually went up to Silicon Valley. We went up to basically up to Stanford. There was a defense tech event put on by Anduril around Stanford. And so we took a party bus up there that got a lot of attention online, intentionally. And then we all came back and went straight into this 24-hour no sleep defense tech hackathon. Basically, none of the founders were partaking in the hackathon directly, but we were like judging and walking around, and it made such an impact, and so many companies came out of that hackathon, ones that now aren't even, headquartered in El Segundo, but like got their start there. And I think that was like the tipping point. It was looking at it now pretty early on, basically none of the El Segundo companies were like successful yet, but it established it as a place and a thing. And now it's one of the clear points to me when we like think back on the history.
Yeah, well documented on Twitter or X for anyone to go see. And you had everyone from kind of elder statesman Josh Steinman to a bunch of young folks. Very interesting time indeed. All right, so encourage folks to go look into this. It's definitely an interesting cultural moment. And thanks for sharing that one. So Soren, let's take it back to what we're doing here. U.S. National Drone Association, National Drone Conference, Neros ramping up production out of the worst parts of production hell maybe right now. What is the most important kind of next milestone for you guys as a company that you're working towards?
Yeah, so in 2026, we are intending to produce 100,000 drones. And then we're actually kind of stepping everything back from the near-term goal of being the first company in America to build 1 million drones, and we're basically making every decision in the company on how to get there more quickly. And so I won't speak to everything yet. There's a lot coming down the pipe, but I don't want to say we're out of production hell, because it's actually going to be an order of magnitude jump up over the next each year, basically for the next few years. So it's going to be really, really hard. We're expanding the team a ton. When I look at 2026 and sort of what's next, just continuing the hiring, recruiting push is going to be massive. And then the drone dominance program, super, super excited for this. Now we're looking at the first fly off early next year. And it is fantastic to see this level of support for the drone industrial base coming down from the top level. So again, feels like exactly the right time to be doing what we're doing, and we're leaning forward.
Yeah, we had a couple speakers here at the conference. Secretary Hegseth kind of kicked off the launch. I think the RFI is now on the street.
Yep.
Army CTO Dr. Alex Miller kind of laying out how the Army is going to approach that. What do you think it's going to take to win, to be down selected for, to be one of those ultimate 5 companies that are going to be the declared winners of this program?
I think it's going to be a lot of who can iterate the fastest. There's going to be more than that, more than 5 companies on the first gate or gauntlet, right, whatever they're calling it now. But 12 companies, I think you actually get a widespread within that, right? There is sort of an exponential, I think there's like an exponential curve on what companies in America can produce at rate, can meet the requirements, can iterate quickly, can do all of the things that they need to do. So I think you'll see a widespread of performance in 12 companies. Yeah. And to be one of those final ones, it's going to be a lot of how quickly can you move. So we've learned a lot about this, operating extensively in Ukraine for the past 2.5 years. We've made so many design revisions to our drone and learned how to roll that into mass production, because coupling those two things together is really, really hard. But that's where I'm betting.
Yeah. And what do you think between kind of the Ukraine problem set, mission set, user base, and what you're seeing in terms of the demand signal from the US? Is there 50% overlap, 25% overlap? Give us a sense of, because I think one of the conversations that's now coming out, we had for 2 years, we had learned the lessons of Ukraine.
Yep.
And now we have a little bit more sophistication around, okay, there's things that are really similar to how the US operates, and then there's a lot that's really different to how the US military operates. I'm curious how much overlap you see right now.
Yeah, so we are, basically our strategy for this is that we have an office in Ukraine. We have folks who are directly supporting the military units there. We are constantly tracking, the technical progress of the ecosystem. We're constantly making changes to our drones that are in country. Yeah. And so often the Neros drones that are in Ukraine will look different than the Neros drones that are shipping out from the factory in El Segundo. And the pace that's happening there is, faster than we can even keep up with, like, rolling changes into production. Where I think our advantage is versus a company that's just on the ground in Ukraine is being able to operate on longer development timelines. So instead of, changing the firmware to change the frequency every week, like, we can make a more flexible radio, for example. And so what it means, like, there's a period of time where we're lagging behind, but then there's a jump forward. And so what I'm trying to get at is basically balancing, like, looking at what's happening in Ukraine, what things are working and what things are not, then using that to make smart decisions to then develop on a slightly longer timeline. And that's how we kind of, like, it's okay for the products to be different between Ukraine and the US. It just means we have to have more resources, but we're fine with that.
Yep.
And, then there's the difference in the actual user base.
Yep.
Some of the users in America are trying to go after very similar mission sets, long range strike with FPVs on, infantry, light vehicles, tanks. That is, that's where the most direct lessons from how FPV has been developed in Ukraine can be pulled. Then you have scenarios that are totally different. Close quarters combat is not something that Ukraine uses FPV drones for. And that's actually, I think, a good question. Like, Ukraine does have some close quarters combat, but they never use FPVs. Why is that the case? Why do we want to use FPVs for close quarters combat? There's certainly a good answer to that, but I think we should be, like, pretty aware of the limitations of the systems as well, and think about, like, what makes sense and what doesn't. And Ukraine's a really good proof point for that. But I'm not, definitely not saying we need to fight the same way, because I don't think we do or should.
Or that we're angling for, protracted trench warfare in a future American conflict. But,
exactly.
Who knows? Really interesting. So real quick, let's touch on just the PBAS program, because I think it'd be a mistake to not at least talk about it. And one of your, if not the biggest American contract you have, certainly among it. So what's the user base want there, and how are you guys meeting that need?
Yeah, so for PBAS as it's defined right now, it's kind of both of those two scenarios that I just touched on. It's long range strike and close quarters combat. So for us, that means a larger variant and a smaller variant, a 10-inch variant and a 5-inch variant of Archer. That is, we have designed the system such that you can actually use the same body between 5-inch, 8-inch, and 10-inch, and it's up to the user on how they configure the drone. So, I mean, we'll ship it out with a certain arm size, but they can then change it out and get to a 10-inch if they need it. And so that's something we've done to try to make it very flexible, because partially because I think the Army is still figuring all this stuff out, right? Yeah. So if right now they say we need X quantity of 5-inch and Y quantity of 10-inch, I question if that'll be the case in 6 months. And so we want to have something that's very, very flexible to adapt to the different requirements of the end users.
Name of the game, right? We know what we want today, and that's going to be very different tomorrow. So
yeah, exactly.
It's a good bet. Cool. Let's last thing. I mean, we're here, the U.S. National Drone Association. You guys were at Crucible 1. You'll be at Crucible 2. The part of development and testing and evaluation and then training that we have in the U.S. here, this isn't how things typically work, right? It's not, you don't see this joint exercise. You don't see all of these folks getting to interact direct with industry. What's it been like for you guys to participate in this, and what's the value to a company like Neros?
Yeah, so Crucible 1, I spent a good amount of time there, spent a good amount of time just like with the end users, which is kind of my favorite part of anything like this. That is where you get the most direct, most high quality information. And so that is something that, we've tried to replicate internally. We have what we call our mission success team. And so that is the folks who are, flying out to the end users to make sure that everything is working well for them. And then they're gathering feedback and they're bringing that, directly back to our engineering team. But something like Crucible is, that in an event, which is amazing. And then you're also getting to see, other ideas being tested, right?
Yep.
And it's not like, oh, I need to snoop on what my competitor is doing, but like at the end of the day, we should all be working together here, right? The common enemy with the folks who are at Crucible is not your industry competitor. Right. It is, the near peer and peer adversaries of America and our allies. Right. And so any event like this that can test new ideas and show, again, what's working and what's not working. Because at Crucible 1, many things, even in a very controlled like range environment that is pretty ideal for a lot of the systems, so many failures, right? And so then you get this really like clear, visible data back, and you get to say, okay, we need to go make these changes. And so I really, really like that about this type of cross-pollination with end users, decision makers, and private industry.
Love it. It's the name of the game. Before we let you go, Soren, there's a lot of young folks out here. There's a lot of drone enthusiasts, drone curious people who maybe want to be a part of the industry. They want to be a part of the solution. They're thinking about how to do that. And so I'm curious if there's Soren's call for startups here. If you were going to, or it doesn't have to be startups, but where should attention of young mission-driven people, they don't have to be young, middle-aged, old mission-driven people who want to be useful in this industry, what should they be thinking about? Where should they be focused?
Yeah, so I would encourage, just starting off, I think learning it is a hobby personally is a great starting point, right? Go watch the YouTube videos on how to build an FPV drone. Then go build an FPV drone, start flying, figure out like how this stuff actually works, because then you'll be in a much better position to go, either start a company or work at another company. Also say, this is a biased take, but I think, if you're really excited about this problem, it doesn't necessarily mean go start something new, because there are a lot of great companies in the space. And like, we will, not just because I need to hire, I'm saying this, but just looking at the trends of history, we will have to consolidate talent. If we're going to have an American DJI, which is, what I think we need, what I am trying to build in many ways, that means consolidating the best talent and the best technology under a unified direction. And so there's, agency is great, but starting something new may not actually be the highest impact solution. Maybe it is. I'm not. I don't want to prescribe to anyone, but I think it's a good thing to call out.
Absolutely. Well, now that you've inspired a bunch of folks, if they want to learn more about Neros, if they want to apply to a job, they want to follow along, where should they go?
Neros.tech/careers has all of our open positions. And then you can check out any of our socials, LinkedIn, our website, our newsroom, just to see what we've been up to. But just also can reach out to us, info@neros.tech. We love talking to candidates and just people who are interested. And that's also how we field most of our kind of inbound inquiries for buying our products.
Amazing. Awesome. Soren, excited to see what the next 6 months has in store for you guys. Thanks for making time. Thanks for being here.
Thank you very much.